The whisper of a message, carried across vast oceans, had the potential to reshape the world. It was a coded missive, intended for the eyes of an ambassador, outlining a clandestine alliance, a secret handshake between nations poised for conflict. Yet, within its intricate layers of numbers and symbols, lay not just military strategy, but a hidden narrative, a story of human ingenuity and quiet persistence that would ultimately draw a sleeping giant into the heart of a global war. To truly understand how this pivotal message, the Zimmermann telegram, came to alter the course of history, we must first examine its intricate origins, the world it sprang from, and the dedicated minds who patiently worked to unravel its secrets. The year is 1917. The Great War, as it was then known, had been raging for nearly 3 years. Europe was a tapestry of trenches, a landscape scarred by unimaginable conflict. Nations, locked in a brutal stalemate, poured their resources, their manpower, and their very souls into the colossal effort. The United States, for its part, remained officially neutral, a powerful observer on the sidelines, its immense industrial capacity and vast reserves of potential manpower a significant, if uncommitted, asset. President Woodrow Wilson, a man deeply committed to peace and the principle of American non-intervention, held firm to this neutrality, despite growing internal pressures and increasingly frequent clashes between American shipping and German submarines. The submarine warfare conducted by Germany, particularly the sinking of unarmed vessels like the Lusitania in 1915, had stoked public outrage, but it had not yet been enough to propel the nation into the fray. Naval warfare in this era was evolving at a rapid pace. The dominance of surface fleets, while still a significant factor, was being challenged by the silent, unseen threat of the U-boat. Communications between fleets, between admirals and their captains, and between governments and their diplomatic corps became increasingly vital. And with that vital communication came the age-old practice of cryptography. Both sides engaged in the painstaking art of encoding their messages, hoping to shield their plans and intentions from enemy intelligence. The British, with their vast global empire and their formidable Royal Navy, had a long-standing tradition of naval intelligence and code-breaking. They understood the strategic advantage of knowing an adversary's secrets. Within the labyrinthine corridors of the British Admiralty, a quiet but dedicated group of individuals toiled away, their lives consumed by the intricate dance of numbers and letters. This was Room 40, a clandestine unit that had been established even before the outbreak of war, initially tasked with monitoring German naval communications. Their headquarters, a rather unassuming location, housed a collection of minds, often drawn from academia, from the civil service, and from the ranks of those with a natural aptitude for puzzles and patterns. These were not dashing spies or heroic commandos. They were, in essence, librarians of secrets, meticulously sifting through reams of intercepted messages, searching for the key that would unlock the enemy's intentions. The process of code-breaking was, and remains, a marathon, not a sprint. It involved immense patience, a deep understanding of linguistic patterns, and an almost intuitive grasp of how human beings would attempt to conceal their thoughts. Intercepted messages, often in the form of radio transmissions, would arrive at Room 40 in a seemingly random jumble of characters. The first step was to identify the underlying code or cipher system being used. This was a monumental task in itself, as the Germans employed a variety of methods, from simple substitution ciphers to more complex polyalphabetic systems and even sophisticated mechanical devices. One of the primary challenges was the sheer volume of intercepted traffic. The Germans, like all major powers, communicated extensively. Room 40 had to process thousands of messages, looking for recurring patterns, for common phrases, for any hint of a structure that could be exploited. The operators themselves played a crucial role, meticulously transcribing the intercepted signals, ensuring accuracy in a process that was prone to error due to atmospheric conditions and the limitations of early radio technology. The team within Room 40 was a diverse group. Men like Nigel de Grey, a linguist and a keen amateur cryptographer, and William Montgomery, a scholar of classical languages, brought their intellectual rigor to bear on the problem. There were also individuals with a more practical bent, those who understood the mechanics of communication, and the ways in which messages could be transmitted and received. The atmosphere within Room 40 was not one of frantic urgency or high drama, but rather of intense, focused concentration. The work was repetitive, often tedious, and the breakthroughs, when they came, were usually the result of painstaking effort and logical deduction, rather than sudden flashes of inspiration. They would meticulously analyze the frequency of individual letters or groups of letters within a ciphertext. For instance, in English, the letter E is the most common, followed by T, A, O, and I. A simple substitution cipher, where each letter is replaced by another, could often be broken by comparing the frequency distribution of characters in the ciphertext to the known frequencies of letters in the English language. However, the Germans were sophisticated adversaries, and they rarely relied on such elementary methods for important communications. They would employ techniques designed to obscure these frequency patterns, making the task considerably more difficult. Polyalphabetic ciphers, for example, used multiple substitution alphabets, often determined by a keyword. This meant that the same plaintext letter could be encrypted as different ciphertext characters, significantly complicating frequency analysis. Breaking these required identifying the length of the keyword, a process that often involved complex mathematical techniques and a great deal of trial and error. Another common method involved using codebooks, where numbers or groups of letters represented entire words or phrases. Deciphering these relied on obtaining or reconstructing the codebook, a task that was immensely challenging without direct access. The German Naval Command, known as the Admiralstab, was particularly adept at using multiple layers of encryption for its most sensitive communications. They were aware of the British efforts, and they continually sought to improve their security. They understood that a breach in their cryptographic security could have devastating consequences. Amidst this ongoing struggle for cryptographic superiority, the war continued to escalate. The United States, though neutral, was increasingly entangled in the conflict. American ships were vital for supplying the Allied powers, and they faced constant danger from German U-boats. The German unrestricted submarine warfare policy, which declared the waters around Great Britain a war zone and targeted any ship entering it, was a constant source of friction. It was in this charged atmosphere that Arthur Zimmermann, the Foreign Secretary of the German Empire, began to formulate a diplomatic strategy that would prove to be a turning point. The German High Command, particularly figures like Erich Ludendorff and Paul von Hindenburg, was convinced that a decisive victory on the Western Front was attainable, but they also recognized the significant advantage that American neutrality provided to the Allied cause. They believed that if they could keep the United States out of the war, Germany would have a better chance of achieving victory. However, the German leadership was also growing increasingly frustrated by the British naval blockade, which was severely impacting Germany's ability to import essential goods and sustain its war effort. In response, they decided to reintroduce unrestricted submarine warfare, a policy they had temporarily suspended in the past due to American diplomatic protests. This decision, made in early 1917, was a calculated risk, a gamble that they could starve Britain into submission before the United States could effectively intervene. But Zimmermann, while committed to Germany's war aims, also understood the diplomatic ramifications of this decision. He feared that the resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare would inevitably push the United States into the war on the side of the Allies. He sought a way to counter this potential American intervention, to offer an incentive to the United States to remain neutral, or, failing that, to distract and preoccupy it. It was against this backdrop that Zimmermann drafted a now infamous telegram. This was not a message sent in haste, but a carefully considered diplomatic maneuver, a proposal designed to exploit existing tensions and resentments. The telegram was intended for the German ambassador in Mexico, Heinrich von Eckart. Its contents were bold, audacious, and, from the perspective of the British, incredibly valuable. The telegram proposed a secret alliance between Germany and Mexico should the United States enter the war. In exchange for Mexico's active participation in the conflict against the United States, Germany offered substantial financial assistance and, crucially, pledged to help Mexico regain territories lost to the United States in the Mexican-American War of the mid-19th century. This included Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. It was a remarkable proposition, a direct attempt to destabilize the United States from within and to divert American attention and resources away from the European theater. The German Foreign Office believed this telegram was of such paramount importance that it should be sent via the most reliable means available. However, in wartime, reliable communication channels were often compromised. Direct telegraph lines between Germany and Mexico were virtually non-existent. The Germans had to rely on neutral channels, and in this instance, they chose to utilize the British undersea cable system. This decision proved to be a critical miscalculation. The British, as part of their extensive naval blockade and intelligence gathering efforts, had established a sophisticated system for intercepting and examining all telegraphic traffic passing through their cables. Room 40, with its dedicated team of codebreakers, was at the forefront of these operations. The interception of the Zimmermann telegram was not a singular event, but rather the culmination of a series of efforts. British intelligence had been working to crack German diplomatic codes for some time. They had achieved partial successes, gaining access to some of the simpler ciphers. However, the Germans were continually upgrading their security. The interception of this particular telegram was facilitated by a stroke of good fortune, coupled with the persistent efforts of Room 40. Early in 1917, the British intercepted a series of messages from the German Foreign Office in Berlin to its diplomatic missions abroad. Among these was the telegram destined for Ambassador von Eckart in Mexico City. However, there was a complication. The Germans were aware that British interception was a possibility and had taken measures to obscure their communications. The telegram itself was encrypted, and to add another layer of difficulty, it was transmitted using a new code, codebook number 13040, a system that Room 40 had not yet fully deciphered. The message arrived at Room 40 in a jumbled sequence of numbers. The initial analysis suggested it was a diplomatic communication of some importance. Given the origin and destination, the codebreakers immediately set to work. Nigel de Grey, recognizing the potential significance, along with his colleagues, began the arduous process of attempting to break the cipher. The pressure was immense. Every intercepted message was a potential key to understanding enemy intentions, and the stakes of the war were higher than ever. The process of breaking codebook number 13040 was not instantaneous. It required meticulous comparison of intercepted messages with known plaintexts where possible, and a deep understanding of German diplomatic protocols. They knew the sender and the recipient, which offered some clues. They also understood the general context of the war and the diplomatic maneuvers that Germany might be undertaking. The breakthrough, when it came, was the result of a collaborative effort, a testament to the collective intelligence and perseverance of the Room 40 team. They managed to identify certain patterns within the ciphertext that suggested a structure they could exploit. It's important to understand that code breaking is not simply about finding a magic key. It is often an iterative process of analysis, hypothesis, and testing. They would propose a possible decryption, then check if it made grammatical and logical sense. If it didn't, they would revise their hypothesis and try again. The story of how Room 40 acquired the necessary plaintexts to break codebook 1340 is itself fascinating. It involved the intercept and decryption of earlier, less sensitive messages from the German Foreign Office that used this new code. These earlier messages, though not as strategically vital as the Zimmermann telegram itself, provided the crucial linguistic material and structural clues that allowed the codebreakers to begin building a working version of codebook 1340. It was a painstaking process, akin to assembling a jigsaw puzzle where many of the pieces are missing or warped. As the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, the astonishing content of the telegram started to emerge. The codebreakers, accustomed to the grim realities of wartime intelligence, would have still been struck by the sheer audacity of Zimmermann's proposal. The idea of Germany actively encouraging Mexico to attack the United States offering tangible incentives, was a bold diplomatic gambit designed to fundamentally alter the strategic landscape of the war. The decoded message was immediately brought to the attention of the highest levels of the British government. Arthur Balfour, the British Foreign Secretary, was a key figure in receiving and understanding the implications of this intelligence. The discovery presented Britain with a significant dilemma. On one hand, the telegram was an invaluable piece of intelligence. It provided irrefutable proof of Germany's hostile intentions towards the United States. Revealing this information to the Americans could potentially be the catalyst that brought their immense power into the war on the Allied side, a prospect that Britain desperately desired. On the other hand, revealing the telegram posed a considerable risk to British intelligence operations. If the Americans knew that their own communications were being intercepted and deciphered, it could compromise future intelligence gathering efforts. Moreover, if the Americans knew that Britain possessed the capability to break German codes, it could also lead to a shift in the balance of intelligence power. The British faced a delicate balancing act. They needed to ensure that the information was conveyed to the Americans in a way that was both effective and credible, without revealing the full extent of their code-breaking capabilities. They decided to present the decoded telegram to the United States through a more circuitous route. They claimed to have obtained the telegram from a Mexican source, an ingenious deception that allowed them to protect the secrecy of Room 40's operations. This was a crucial part of the strategy, as it allowed the Americans to believe that they had discovered the telegram themselves, or through a neutral intermediary, rather than acknowledging that their own diplomatic traffic was vulnerable to British interception. The British meticulously prepared the decoded message, ensuring its accuracy and clarity. They presented it to the American ambassador in London, Walter Hines Page, in late February 1917. Page, a staunch supporter of the Allied cause, immediately recognized the profound significance of the document. The content of the Zimmermann telegram was deeply inflammatory. It exposed Germany's willingness to actively foment conflict on America's doorstep, a direct threat to American sovereignty and security. The proposal to reclaim lost territories was a potent appeal to Mexican nationalism, and from the German perspective, a calculated attempt to exploit existing grievances between the United States and Mexico. The revelation of the telegram sent shockwaves through the American government and public. While the United States had been increasingly disillusioned with German actions, particularly the unrestricted submarine warfare, there had been significant domestic opposition to entering the war. Many Americans felt that the conflict in Europe was a European affair and that the United States had no stake in it. President Wilson himself had campaigned for re-election in 1916 on the slogan, "He kept us out of war." However, the Zimmermann telegram provided concrete evidence of Germany's aggressive intentions towards the United States. It painted a picture of a Germany willing to undermine American stability and territorial integrity. The telegram was subsequently handed over to President Wilson, who initially viewed it with skepticism, suspecting it might be a British fabrication designed to draw America into the war. To verify the authenticity of the telegram, the Americans conducted their own investigation. They contacted their ambassador in Mexico City, Heinrich von Eckart, to see if he had received such a message. Ambassador Eckart, under immense pressure, was forced to admit that he had indeed received the telegram from Berlin. This confirmation solidified the telegram's authenticity and removed any lingering doubts for President Wilson. The public reaction to the revelation of the Zimmermann telegram was overwhelmingly negative towards Germany. The American press widely condemned the telegram, portraying it as a treacherous and cowardly act. The idea of Germany inciting Mexico to attack the United States was seen as a profound insult and a direct threat to national security. The turning point came on April 2, 1917, when President Woodrow Wilson addressed a joint session of Congress. In his speech, he declared that the United States could no longer stand idly by in the face of German aggression. He spoke of the need to make the world safe for democracy and to defend American ideals and interests. The Zimmermann telegram though not explicitly named as the sole catalyst, was a critical piece of evidence that tipped the scales in favor of war. On April 6, 1917, the United States formally declared war on Germany, thus ending its period of neutrality and irrevocably altering the course of the Great War. The impact of the Zimmermann telegram was profound. The entry of the United States into the war brought with it immense resources, both human and industrial, that were sorely needed by the exhausted Allied powers. American troops, though their arrival in significant numbers took time, provided a much-needed morale boost and a crucial influx of manpower. American industrial might began to churn out weapons, supplies, and ships, bolstering the Allied war effort. The naval codebreakers of Room 40, through their diligent and methodical work, had played a pivotal, if largely unseen, role in this monumental shift. Their quiet dedication to deciphering coded messages, their intellectual rigor, and their painstaking attention to detail had unearthed a secret that would directly lead to the United States entering the war. It was a testament to the power of intelligence, to the importance of understanding the enemy's intentions, and to the often unsung heroes who operate behind the scenes. The story of the Zimmermann telegram is not one of dramatic espionage or daring raids, but of sustained intellectual effort and the subtle art of deciphering secrets. It highlights how the meticulous analysis of patterns, the application of linguistic and mathematical principles, and the unwavering patience of individuals can have consequences that resonate across continents and through history. The codebreakers of Room 40, working in their quiet rooms, were instrumental in shaping the outcome of a global conflict, proving that sometimes the most powerful weapons are not made of steel, but of intellect and perseverance. The legacy of their work, though hidden from public view for many years, underscores the critical importance of intelligence in shaping the course of international relations and global events. Their story, a testament to quiet dedication and intellectual prowess, unfolded amidst the clamor of war, a subtle but powerful force that helped to tip the scales towards a decisive outcome.